Good morning, and nice to introduce you to our journalists. I have roughly made a picture of the new parliament, the trends, but we still are at the very will have the possibility to tell all journalists about your views on the Ukraine-Russia topic as well. So, Mr. Rozati has been elected for a second time in the parliament in May 2014. He was firstly elected in the parliament in 2004, so he had the first mandate until 2009. Professor Rozati is an economist, a specialist in the international trade relations, by the way. A few years ago, he used to be a Minister of Foreign Affairs under two Polish Prime Ministers, Oleksii and Cimoszewicz. It was in the late 90s, 97 if I well remember. And later on, Mr. Rozati was a member of the board of the advisors of the Central Bank and even number 2 deputy chair of the Central Bank with a leading role in the economy and the developing economy of Poland as well. Now, Mr. Rozati is now in the EPP group. By the way, he was elected on the constituency in Poland because Poland has the different regions. And he was elected in the west part of Poland around Szczecin, close to the German border, by the way. You're already involved quite a lot in this discussion for the transatlantic treaty with the United States and Canada as well. I could see that you had a first statement in the plenary in July, starting. Mr. Rozati has an Italian origin as well, speaks different languages, French, English, German.
Not really German. No, German. It's
Polish, of course, Italian, I guess. He might understand Ukrainian and Russian, probably.
Well, there's every Pole, of course.
Professor Rozati, please, the floor is yours. And what is the situation between Ukraine and Russia in Ukraine itself? And by the way, about the sanctions that the European Union had just decided to enhance, although they are waiting until tomorrow to be eventually implemented and published. Please.
Okay, thank you very much, Michel. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet with Ukrainian journalists. Ukraine is very much on the top of our agenda here in this parliament, and as you can imagine, also in Poland. How much time do we have for this? Because
well, you can have it for 5-6 minutes, and then we go for the questions.
Okay. I hope you enjoy your visit to Brussels, and certainly you meet different people, and probably you listen their opinions on the same subject, that is on the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. So probably what I'm going to say is not something particularly new. I will give you a very brief summary of of my assessment of the situation, simply, but which is my, I would say, personal perspective. There is a broad agreement in this House on what has happened. That is, we know that we have witnessed an invasion of Russian forces into Ukraine. Everybody condemns this invasion. Russia has violated all norms of international law, be it the UN Charter, OSCE, Founding Act, Council of Europe Charter, and whatever. It also acted in the breach of its commitments under the Budapest Memorandum. from 1994, and so on that account, everybody's it's quite clear. This has been a blatant aggression. Now, what differs us here in this Parliament is, of course, is the issue of how to react to this. The European Union is, of course, moving forward in terms of also escalating its response towards Russia, but there are different opinions whether the speed and the scope of those sanctions and reactions is appropriate. The member states are divided on this point. We have basically three groups of member states. Some of them are in favor of soft approach. We call them doves. And among them, of course, are traditionally in that group was Germany, France, not anymore, I must say. We have other Russian allies in this group, if I may say so. These are some smaller countries from our region, by the way. On the other extreme, we have hardliners, we can say, to which also my country belongs, of course, and probably the Baltic states, the UK, and perhaps we see other countries joining us. And there is a middle group, including the largest EU member states like Germany and France, that have a position which evolves from being very mild and soft on Russia and becoming more and more determined to impose sanctions. Now, those, since the Union wants to act in unison, that is, it wants to take a position, a common position, and speak with one voice, then, of course, the final position of the Union and the decision it takes is determined by the last being on board, right? So the least willing country to impose sanctions or to go into confrontation with Russia is practically this country which determines the final common position. There is no possibility to change this consensus-building approach, right? The Union will not definitely allow itself to speak in different voices. So for many people, what is being done on the Union side may be insufficient, but this is simply because we want always to have 28 member states together. Now, what is my assessment on what will be the, let's say, the future, the immediate future? Now, in my opinion, President Putin wants to re-establish the empire. And of course, the way to do that is to restore control over independent states that have emerged from the former Soviet Union, be it in the form of annexation of parts of their territory, being in the form of establishing governments that would be pro-Russian, essentially. I mean, that plan, of course, would not be to recreate the empire would not be realistic without control of Ukraine. As long as President Yanukovych was in power, Putin could have been certain that Ukraine would not, let's say, drift away from the Kremlin, and that Ukraine would not be interested or willing or planning to join Western institutions. But after the Maidan revolution, of course, the situation has changed, and President Putin realized that he has to use other means and instruments and methods in order to regain control of Ukraine. His plan for today, I think, is to keep control of certain eastern part of Ukraine, including Crimea, and to freeze this conflict in order to have first an argument in terms of fait accompli, that is the accomplished facts, the government in Kiev has to admit that it has to negotiate with the separatists, which is a de facto recognition of their limited sovereignty over Donetsk and Luhansk. And the second, more distant goal, of course, is to use these separatist areas to destabilize the government in Ukraine, in Kiev. Putin's goal is simply to demonstrate to the Ukrainian people that the current government, which has declared itself as pro-European, pro-democratic, is simply inefficient. And the real test will come in winter times, of course, when economic problems and probably gas supply interruptions may indeed put a pressure on the Ukrainian population to question the validity and the rationality of the choice taken by the government in Kiev. So the overall objective is to destabilize the current government, convince people that this government and this policy course doesn't pay off for the Ukrainians, and to continue this policy until the extent of fatigue, the extent of tiredness of the Ukrainian people will be such that they will be prepared to accept another government, which would be much more friendly toward Kremlin. Now, the frozen conflicts in eastern Ukraine will serve as a very handy instrument of steering confusion. As you all know, the definition of a frozen conflict is such that it can always be unfrozen. If there is a situation when Russia thinks that some instability would be useful, then of course always we can expect fighting starting again, and of course distracting the attention of the Kiev's government from rebuilding the country and stabilizing the economy, putting the house in order, and then again the government will be busy with eastern parts. So this is the method Russia has used in Georgia. The same thing happens in Moldova, and from that point of view, I think this truce which has been signed it carries a big danger. I mean, I understand the position of the Ukrainian government, which probably was forced to somehow go for some kind of a suspension of armed conflict, but that was definitely a risky strategy because, as I say, this implies a de facto recognition of the control of separatists over eastern part of Ukraine. Now, and this is the last thing I want to say, the Western countries react in a way which I said may be considered as insufficient. But let me tell you that economic sanctions, they work. They work in a longer term, but they work. Economic sanctions, which I hope will be activated tomorrow, because we don't see any sign from the Russian side to back off, will be activated tomorrow, will put additional burden on the already strained Russian economy. Russia is suffering from a number of problems, falling oil and gas prices, limited access to finance. I don't speak about minor nuances like ban on traveling or freeze of assets for individuals. This is not that much important, although it may have some impact on Kremlin's policy. But economically, Russia is going to pay a very high price. But it's going to pay it in a medium to longer run, that is 2-3 years. The question is what to do in the meantime, until the moment when the sanctions will indeed have this major impact. I hope that support of the Russian people for this kind of policy will gradually fade away. I hope that the people in Russia will soon feel the pinch of the embargo, which was imposed by Russia itself, and the standards of living will be falling, And finally, the whole social support for this kind of aggressive policy will dissipate in future. So this is how I see things. I would definitely not make any comment on whether the decision to sign the truce agreement with separatists is good or not or bad, because this is not my business, of course. This is a sovereign decision by your president and your government. What I'm saying only, it probably both the refusal to sign the truce would carry some risks, because that would mean continuation of fighting, and the signing of the truce also carries some risk. And this is, of course, up to you to weigh the risks of on both sides and to find the right policy response.
Spasiba. Thank you very much.
As I said already, that some countries are more willing to impose sanctions, some other member states are less willing. As you rightly pointed out, at this last round of discussions about sanctions last week, actually the decision has been taken unanimously. But at the same time, several countries said, okay, but let's wait with the implementation of the sanctions until we see whether the truce agreement is working. And those countries which wanted to suspend the sanctions for a week, actually, because this is until tomorrow, were, of course, as you mentioned, Finland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, I'm not sure, maybe Hungary, definitely.
No, Hungary, sorry.
Hungary, not the Czech Republic, and not Cyprus. So there are 3 or 4 countries, probably, if I'm correct, yeah. Hungary, Slovakia, and Finland for sure. Finland made it clear that it is not against the sanctions as such, but still, because of these enormous costs for its economy, it is afraid of, then it waits, it asks for suspension of those sanctions. Now, the COREPE, that is the ambassadors of the members, the permanent representatives will gather tomorrow and will decide on implementing those new sanctions. I'm pretty sure that the decision will be to implement them.
That's what we heard already today.
And these new sanctions, of course, are quite important because they now target the major Russian companies in the oil and gas sector in terms of their access to finance in the West. They've been financing themselves for years from Western sources, and this may be really difficult for them to find a substitute for these financial means they were getting from the West. Now they are going to be cut off from that.
Yeah, please. The name and the media, please.
Valery Jotango, Screen on TV. Mr. Rozati, you've portrayed a pretty adequate synopsis of Putin's aims to create a frozen conflict in such a way and keep the Ukraine back anyway, sooner or later. How many high European officials and members of parliament do share this view? This is their stance, their vision is different.
Well, I would say many now. Not so many 6 months ago. Actually, 6 months ago, there were many people, there were majority people in this parliament representing political forces across Europe that would rather look deeply into eyes of Mr. Putin and would see a true Democrat. Or they were still prepared to make subsequent resets of the Russian-Western relationship. But after those recent months and all the events in eastern Ukraine, even Chancellor Merkel realized that her phone calls to Mr. Putin, and there were, I don't know how many, 15 or 20 phone calls and phone conversations, they don't lead us anywhere. So there is a growing recognition that, unfortunately, for some of them, this was clear from the beginning. For example, for the Poles or for the Baltic states, it was clear from the beginning that that was the policy of Putin. But this truth is gradually finding its way also to the minds of other Western politicians, especially the French, the Spanish, and the Germans. And I cannot tell you how many of them share my opinion, but I can tell you that much more now than 3 months ago. And we are trying to indeed convey the message that what happened in Ukraine, unfortunately, is not a big surprise to us. Because we remember words of President Putin from 2004, that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the largest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. If someone deplores a collapse of a totalitarian state, which was, of course, did not respect any human rights, which was aggressive vis-à-vis its neighbors, and this, who says these words, is a president of Russia, then of course we should be alerted to the highest possible extent. So that was the message we tried to convey to our Western partners over the last 10 years, at least since the Orange Revolution. And, but nobody would listen. I mean, not maybe nobody, but the British would listen, probably some other politicians from here and there. But recent 4 months, 3 months, have been a crash course on geopolitics in Europe for many Western politicians, and I see much more willingness to take a tough line on Russia right now.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, of course, we take into account this possibility, and we, especially the Baltic, our colleagues from the Baltic states, they say that, okay, in 2008, Georgia, now Ukraine, Crimea, Ukraine, and then tomorrow will be Estonia and Latvia. On that matter, of course, I don't see an immediate danger of such a scenario, I must say, although I don't exclude it completely, but I don't see an immediate danger for several reasons. I think there is no immediate plans in Kremlin to restore control over the Baltic states or Poland or Romania. Secondly, all those countries are members of NATO, and NATO summit, and also President Obama himself gave a very strong support to this concept, idea of collective defense. His visit to Tallinn has been a demonstration of unconditional support of Western countries, including the US, to the integrity and territorial integrity and sovereignty of those countries. So I think, indeed, even as unpredictable as President Putin realizes that would be indeed foolish on his side, on his side to start meddling through in other places. In this context, of course, we can regret only that Ukraine refused to join NATO several years ago. Probably it was not yet at that time possible, but at least if that had been an idea which could have been somehow progressed in the course of the last years, that Ukraine would be much closer to NATO probably, and that could be an additional factor of your security. Right now, of course, the readiness of the Western countries to provide support to Ukraine is limited. Nobody is going to send troops, this is clear. Even to send you weapons is difficult right now. Although I'm pretty confident that within the next, let's say, few days or weeks, it's going to be a decision that several countries will start providing supplies of weapons to the Ukrainian army to strengthen the army. There are, of course, political problems with this, and none of the NATO member states wants to do it on its own. We need a consent again, and we need an action taken by several countries at the same time. So Poland, in principle, would be prepared and willing, but we want to do it together with our allies in the NATO. Well, so that's why I said that, given that unwillingness of Western states to provide military support to the Ukrainian army. I understand President Poroshenko decided that the truce probably is a safer solution than continued fighting, which nobody knows how it would end. You refer to the 19th century politics by Russia. You are absolutely right. We think that, well, let me start with a general observation. The recent months have demonstrated that the post-Cold War security paradigm in Europe has collapsed completely. That post-Cold War paradigm was based on three premises. The first, that Russia is a normal state, quote unquote, which wants to build a liberal democracy and market economy. And so it is a state like us here, like in Western Europe. The second premise is that Russia is a partner, not a rival anymore. That we can establish partnership, that we establish a number of institutions, NATO, Russia, Cooperation Council, all sorts of partnership agreements and so on and so forth. And the third premise is that the war is unthinkable in Europe. Well, all those premises have been negated by the events of the last several months. First, Russia doesn't want to construct a state, to develop a state of the Western type. Instead, it wants to re-establish an empire, based on the concept of sovereign democracy, whatever it may mean. And it doesn't want to base its state on the rule of law and market economy, transparent market economy. This is just an oligarchic type of state capitalism or whatever. Russia has become a rival because it considers Western states as rivals, not as partners.
No longer.
And finally, the war, as we realize, is possible. It is possible. So we need a complete overhaul. We need a complete reassessment of the security policy in Europe. And the first step towards that has been the latest NATO summit. And we go back, I'm afraid, to the era of Cold War again for the next 5, perhaps 10 years. Now the situation is not that dangerous as it was in the 50s, simply because Russia is not that strong as the Soviet Union was at that time. And its leadership is not that crazy as it was Stalin's leadership. And the society, the Russian people, are not that much prepared to accept all sacrifices as they were in the 50s. So probably this episode of Cold War will not be that long and that exhaustive. And Russia is much weaker economically and also militarily than the Soviet Union was. And in proportion to the West, it's really not a match. So it's not going to last long. But the damage they can do over that period may be enormous still. We find the Russian politics anachronistic. I mean, frankly, if he wants to reestablish an empire, he simply forgets, President Putin, that to build a power is not tantamount to grab territories. I mean, this is a 19th concept of a state, right? He should concentrate, I don't know, on improving competitiveness of his economy, innovations, education, health protection. This is the country which is... Can you tell me, if you go to the Western state, wherever, or even in Poland, to a supermarket, can you find Russian goods there? There is no Russian goods on site. I mean, except for gas and oil. And vodka also. Well, okay, vodka. Yeah. Vodka and, I don't know. Probably that's it, right? Look at China. I mean, we have our shops, department stores, are full of Chinese goods. I mean, those people have built a powerful economy. Russia, instead of that, still dreams about Crimea, dreams about, I don't know, again, Chechnya, whatever. I mean, this is an anachronistic political concept, and this runs against Russia's national interest. But those people in the Kremlin probably have other ideas.
Now, we are having lots of questions now. Please make the questions short. Maybe we could have the questions of the lady as well, and we could join the... Yeah. So, could you comment it as an economist? Thank you. Professor.
Okay, yeah. on the first question, I tried to explain that, I fully share your, I would say, frustration on the very slow pace of European response. But this is what I said. I mean, in Poland we were very much clear on that. Likewise, it was in the Baltic states. Perhaps the UK was on our side as well. But there were powerful countries, member states. They didn't want to go so fast. They believed in diplomacy still. They believed in phone calls. Sorry?
We haven't listened to any.
Ah. Okay. No. The
microphone.
Some of the when we proposed tougher sanctions. Do you have translation now?
Yeah, it's okay.
We were in favor. I mean, Poland, for instance, and the Baltic states were in favor of early steps, early sanctions, and much faster, much more serious sanctions. Our idea was to gradually stop buying gas and oil from Russia. I mean, this is the economy which rests, as I said, on oil and gas exploitation. I mean, the revenues of the Russian budget, 50%, 60% of the revenues of Russian budget, these are revenues from oil and gas exports. I mean, we could have, if the Americans agreed to sell us the shale gas, a very cheap one, unfortunately they don't have these facilities right now, but that could be arranged within, let's say, 1 year or something, and we could gradually reduce dependence on Russian supplies of oil and gas, then the economy of Russia would collapse within 2 years. This would be very effective. So far, there was no readiness, but okay, the German firms, French firms, Italian companies, they have a lot of business going on in Russia. It was not easy to convince their leaders. So you are frustrated, we've been frustrated as well, but it took time for Europe finally to decide on that sanctions are, after all, necessary. I told you that you cannot expect the European Union to act swiftly. We have to agree among 28 states. This is not like in the case of the United States, where the president actually can take a decision overnight. So, but the one, if I may say so, the good side of it is that President Putin should get probably an award for someone who united Europe around some kind of an action, finally. And once Poland was trying to convince our partners that Russia may be an unpredictable, a dangerous neighbor, they didn't listen. But finally, President Putin, within 3 months, somehow convinced our partners that we were right.
Helping quite a lot.
Now, we cannot, you ask about the possibility, I'm still referring to the second question on military preparations by Russia, right? Well, I think you gained some time. You have to prepare yourself, unfortunately, because I'm quite skeptical. This is not the end of the story. I mean, the Russian occupation of the eastern Ukraine will last for long. Likewise with the Crimea. And I cannot imagine any government in Kiev that would simply give up on this, right? So you have to be prepared in terms of your military readiness to fight separatists. And this is up to the West and the Western and NATO and international pressure on Russia not to prevent direct involvement of Russian army, simply. And in that case, you would be probably able to gradually restore stability in the eastern part. But to what extent we will be strong enough and united enough, and will exert sufficient pressure on the Russians to prevent their direct involvement, it remains to be seen. Now, on the economic issues, and we are sure now that we know that you need 2 types of assistance. One is market access, open market access to the European Union, of course, facilities, all sorts of facilitation, trade facilitation for your companies. I mean, integration that would give you a possibility of exporting to the West and therefore somehow substituting lost markets in the East. But there is a second issue, an immediate assistance, financial assistance to Ukraine. And from what I know, there is a commitment on the European Union side of 15 billion euro. That would go, of course, to cover the basic needs of the economy in terms of gas supplies and food in the coming, let's say, 12 months. This money cannot be, this is still, I mean, there are still some technicalities to be solved before this money can be reimbursed, but definitely the decision is on 15 billion euro. The US has also promised some money, not that much, but actually the US has not, I mean, that was well, whatever president himself could have offered. That was not a decision by the Congress. The Congress, once the Congress takes the issue up, and the Americans will be able to provide much more. And the third source of funds is the International Monetary Fund, which can provide you, and is providing you with some money for balance of payment support. And I think this is, again, up to $10 billion this time. So on balance, I think that basic needs should be satisfied even in the worst scenario of completely cutting supplies from Russia. But I don't want to fool yourself. I mean, the economic situation is very, very difficult in Ukraine. I was in Kiev in July at the conference organized by Soros Foundation, and I spoke to many people at that time, and the reforms which are long overdue in Ukraine, the market reforms, institutional reforms, are long overdue, but they will bring results not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow. We have to be prepared that this will take 2-3 years at least for your economy to pick up. Are you sure that you can survive this transitional period? You can convince your population to be quiet, to take some sacrifices, because this is the crucial point. If people get impatient, if they come to conclusion that this whole Maidan revolution was good for nothing because they suffered terribly, then we may have a backlash again, and this is exactly what President Putin hopes for.
So we have two questions. The lady.
Yes, Polska is within those states. I cannot say about others. I know several states expressed interest, as you said, and they are prepared to do that at a very short notice. But what is needed is we have a formal agreement in NATO that NATO gives free hand to member states, those who want to supply weapons. And on the other hand, we also need some clearance from the European Union, because we still have some restrictions on export of arms to third countries in the Union. But this can be, as I said before, this can be probably cleared within several weeks. Our Minister of Defense, by the way, day before yesterday, they said Ukraine has not approached us for weapon supplies. And day before, and yesterday he said Poland is ready to provide some weapons. So the situation is very dynamic, and I think within several weeks there will be some decisions on that. And I think this is absolutely crucial to give some military support to the Ukrainian army, because frankly speaking, we've been very much disappointed by what's going on. No, that is my personal opinion only. This is, I can say that there are several countries, this you can quote definitely, several countries, several NATO member states are considering supplying weapons to Ukraine, and Poland is one of them, among them.
Yep.
With one Sunday. And I'm absolutely in favor of that, because either we give you weapons in order to enable you to defend yourself, or we should simply ask you to surrender, because why to waste human lives? I mean, this is, we are against that aggression. We think it violates the international order in Europe. This is very dangerous, but at the same time, we don't give you a possibility. We don't give you, I mean, instruments to defend. If someone is attacked in his own house, then it has the right to defend himself. And you have the right to defend yourself and should be given possibilities. Sorry. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was, after all, I was surprised that President Poroshenko agreed to negotiate with those people. I think it weakens his position a little bit, but I understand the circumstances were such that he probably, the Russians demonstrated that they are prepared to open a new front south in the Novoazovsky and Mariupol. So probably your government decided that it would be perhaps too difficult to defend militarily, and therefore he was somehow he decided to accept this offer. In my opinion, there is no such thing like what is this, Donetsk People's Republic or Lugansk People's Republic. I think this is just fiction in terms of created by strategists in Kremlin, only to destabilize, as I say, Ukraine, to establish artificial enclaves that would simply be an offspring for diversive action, future diversion action against Ukraine. And this, of course, internationally, nobody recognizes those people, including their self-proclaimed republics, whatever that may mean for us. There is a principle which we agreed, all of us, in the post-war period, not to change borders in Europe by force. And Russia has violated this, and this, I must say, this is an action without a precedent after the Second World War. I think that the European Parliament is well, first of all, as you know probably, next week we ratify the association agreement, by the way, in a very fast track. This has been without precedent, this kind of procedure. This is simply to demonstrate our support to Ukraine and establish these conducive conditions for Ukrainian companies and business, for the economy, to take benefit of this. The second, on the political side, unfortunately, I'm not a member of European Ukrainian delegation. I know that delegation was in Kiev last week. We even listened today at our group meeting, political group meeting, a report by the head of this Ukrainian delegation, a Croatian guy, right? Blenković, yes. And he said he goes, yeah, you are meeting with him, right? You have a meeting with him?
2:30.
Ah, that's good, because he will brief you on the current, I'm not very familiar with the current works of the parliament on the Ukrainian dossier, so probably you can ask him. I know he goes to Kiev at the end of this week again. Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah.
A huge delegation of the parliament is going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's the best person, himself and Jacek Saryusz-Wolski, who is a permanent representative of the of the European Parliament for Ukrainian matters. So we have two now key guys who definitely will be more competent on this question than myself.
But Jacek Saryusz-Wolski is a rapporteur.
He's a permanent rapporteur.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
But he is a permanent position as a rapporteur for 5 years.
Yeah. No, well, sure, given the fact. Okay, we can have just one last question, because both Professor Rozati and yourselves have to take time for lunch as well before the next meetings, and the group is going on anyway. Anyone? No? It's okay? Just okay, please.
Если у нас вопросов нет, я бы хотела от лица всех украинцев поблагодарить поляков за вашу позицию.
I wish you all good luck. I chwała Ukrainie.
Thank you. We will have some other ones. Yeah, later on in Russian. So we will get back to you. Sure. Anytime. I mean, Jacek is always so happy to diversify. Bardzo dziękuję.
Well, no, the thing is that Peter Montano, he just told me that we have to be at 3:30. Do you have some time to go together?
Yeah.
To a cafe or somewhere?
No, we
And
can
then
go
then
and
I'll just
drop them in the
in the cafeteria and I'll pay for wait for them to go taxi.
because have lunch one.
Back to the hotel doesn't make sense.
You have to go and lunch. So let's go to the canteen.
Okay, let's do that.
Ben, can we go eventually to the... But they
Unfortunately, I have to then figure out the way to cover it because the lunch has been paid already. But it's, I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
And the hotel as well.
Hotel is at Charlemagne, it's a destination.
Yeah, because it takes 15 minutes and
Yeah.
15 minutes back.
And then 15 minutes back and they'll have about half an hour for
Okay, no. Okay. So, there is both solutions. The canteen here